Good evening, everyone. My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the Director of Wellness and Communications at the South Carolina Education Association Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. And that long name, we use the acronym CEWL, and you could find out everything you ever wanted to know about CEWL at CEWL.us, at CEWL.us. Head on over to that website and check out all of the resources that we have, including all the live streams like the one we're doing tonight. All of them will be housed at on the CEWL website. And of course, we would not be here without a grant from the National Education Association and support and collaboration with their state affiliate in South Carolina, the SCEA. And right now, they're still in early enrollment. So if you are interested in joining the SCEA, you can do that right here on this website, jointhescea.org. You can join now. It's June, and you wouldn't pay any dues for June, July, and August. You would only start paying dues in September. So if you're interested in joining now, is a great time during their early enrollment period. So tonight, we have a guest who I discovered on TikTok. I was thumbing through, scrolling one night, and happened to see some of her posts. And I thought, this is a person who's got a lot of interesting things to say about the nervous system and educators and about the system of education. And so I took some of her posts and reposted them on Facebook, and they got tens of thousands of views and a lot of positive comments. So I thought I would invite her on tonight to share some of her thoughts, and I thought that would be something that y'all would find really, really interesting. Her name is Carolyn Contreras. She's a former middle school teacher whose career took a transformative turn when she realized her students weren't staying after school for academic help. They were staying because they needed connection, safety, and support. That insight launched a 2-decade journey through education, behavioral intervention, professional development, and district leadership. After earning a master's degree in educational intervention and serving in roles ranging from behavior specialist to director of community and culture, Carolyn discovered the missing piece that tied everything together. It was the nervous system. Through studying neuroscience, she gained a deeper understanding of student behavior, educator burnout, and even her own health challenges after years of teaching in a chronically activated state. And I know many of you can relate to that. Today, Carolyn is a nervous system educator, author, and trainer who helps schools and educators understand what traditional behavior frameworks have often overlooked. Her work explores the powerful intersection of neuroscience, trauma-informed practice, educator well-being, and the realities of teaching in today's schools. So here she is, ladies and gentlemen, Carolyn Contreras. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you. Thank you, Todd.
Is there anything in your bio that we missed that you'd like to share with folks tonight?
I think you summed it up perfectly. I was thinking about this today, and I was thinking about our talks about cognitive dissonance. And I was thinking, when I left education, that was exactly what happened to me. I went back to school to get my master's degree because, like you said, I was teaching 8th grade and the kids weren't leaving at 3:00.
Right.
My day, I was out the door. And so I decided I wanted to go back and become an intervention specialist for the district I was working at. And so I got my master's degree and I started. And for three years, I was a intervention specialist. And then we changed to behavior specialist. Well, 1 year they decided they were going to cut us. And at that time, I mean, I didn't take lunches. I didn't take breaks. My lunches were meeting with kids. I could not get through my caseload every day. And then they decided to cut our positions. And at that point, I decided I needed to leave because I couldn't go back in the classroom and work for a district that didn't support that position and that support for not only kids, but teachers too.
Right.
And so I've tried to leave education a few times, twice, and I keep finding myself back in it.
Yeah. So there's so many interesting things that you've said through your posts, and for people who are on TikTok, how can they find you on TikTok easily? I know there's a ton of N's. Is that Carolyn?
So what happened with that, I was trying to change my username, not my screen name.
Yeah.
and I changed it, and I was getting frustrated because there were no Carolyns. So I was hijacked and I was annoyed. And so I just put in all these N's. Well, I'm back to the nervous system teacher.
Okay.
So that's
So
my, if they search the nervous system teacher,
okay.
they'll be able to find me. Yeah.
Great, great. So I want to encourage everybody who's watching to go to TikTok if you're on there, and if you're not on TikTok, it's worth downloading the app. Go to the nervous system teacher, search for Carolyn Contreras, and or search for the nervous system teacher, and you'll find Carolyn's page. And there's just so much rich content there. Um, what would be our primary audience is educators who are currently working in buildings in here in South Carolina. What would be if you could share one message with them right now, based upon all the things you've been posting about that you feel like maybe they haven't heard before? What would be something you'd want to share with that group?
I think they've probably heard this, but I want to reiterate, prioritize your health above all, above everything else, prioritize your own health. Because what's happening is I found a study one night. I don't know what I was looking for, but I found this study. It was done in 2001, and it found that teachers have a higher percentage rate of autoimmune disease than other professions, significantly higher. And so I started going down and I said, "Oh, that's 2001. What is it showing now?" And I couldn't find any other study. In this study, it even said we need a follow-up study. We studies for this. Teachers are easy to study because they tend to stay in the profession. They don't leave. The NEA said, yes, we need more studies on this. And guess what happened? Nothing. Nothing. So I posted about it and it went viral. And I had all these teachers saying, I have an autoimmune disease. I'm sick. I have these chronic illnesses. And I started reflecting and I was like, you know what? I haven't had a kidney stone since I've been out of the classroom. I was getting chronic kidney stones.
Right.
And so I created a group on Facebook called They Knew Teachers in Autoimmune Disease. And we have, in just a short time, over 2,000 followers, 2,000 members. These teachers are so sick. And so if there's one thing to reiterate is take care of yourself first, because it doesn't do the kids any good. I think as teachers, we tend to say it's for the kids. It's for the kids. If I don't do it, who's going to do it? You're not good for anybody when you're sick.
Right.
And so that would be my biggest thing is protect your boundaries and protect your health. Take your sick days and go to the doctor.
Yeah. A lot of I think this is a message that sometimes is hard to get through to our early career educators because, they're 25, 30,
Yes.
and they can withstand that stress and they're not really seeing it show up yet. We're talking about with autoimmune diseases or diseases based on chronic stress like heart disease, stroke, and also not taking care of yourself. So then you have diet or nutrition related diseases like diabetes and things like that. They don't see that until it shows up 15 to 20 years later, and then they're not necessarily connecting it with the
Right.
stuff that they've gone through in the profession. They're just thinking, oh, well, I guess that's just because I'm older, but that is not necessarily a natural progression that has to happen. Can you talk about one of the things that I hear back, though, pushback on that is, well, I don't have time. Like, I don't have time to make myself a good meal, and I don't have time to go to a yoga class. I don't have time to go to the gym or can you talk a little bit about like what's the how there, like that in terms of on an individual basis and also on a systems level, how do we convince teachers to make it a priority and devote some of that time?
I think what I found has been most helpful for me is implementing these micro nervous system resets throughout the day. So I have a free link in my bio on all my social media, and it starts with the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. 11 different nervous system resets that take about 30 seconds. And trust me, I have all the books. I have, I can't think of it, the perfect morning routine, all of these. And I used to dismiss them. I thought that's just easy. I need something more concrete. I need something bigger. Oh, these breaths or this, that, how's that really going to help me? So I realized that I have been living most of my life since teaching, and I've been gone from the classroom quite a while in an activated state. I
Right.
function in a very my baseline is activation, and I think that's what a lot of teachers, they're
Yeah.
living in an activated state that they don't even realize it because we normalize it now.
Yeah.
It just becomes, "Oh, this is who I am." So, I was so desperate because I realized I've been living in fight flight that I started implementing these things. And I started implementing, the first thing I do when I wake up is I orient myself to the room. I find 5 things I can see and I name it out loud. I get up and I go outside immediately before I check my phone, before I do any of this. And I can't tell you the difference it makes. It's
Mm.
all these little things make such a difference because they pull you back into hopefully a more regulated state. And you
Right.
can feel it. You can feel that, when I first started learning about breath work, I thought it was just a distraction. Oh, well, it
Mhm.
will get you out of your thoughts. It's a
Right.
distraction. And
Right.
now, oh my gosh, now I can really feel what it does inside. I mean, sometimes it can make you feel so good. You almost feel, almost a sense of like euphoria or something. It's just
Right.
it can get you really to a really good place. So I have these nervous system resets that I do. I mean, even when we drive, it's like I remember when I was in the classroom, the first thing I would do is call my mom when I would get in the car and complain about the day. Well, I'm just keeping the activation going that way.
Yes.
And I know we need to vent, but what I do now when I get in my car after anything difficult is I'll take my breaths and then I do some bilateral tapping on the steering wheel in silence. I won't even put on music because
Right.
certain music is still not calming to us. It's still activating.
Yeah.
So, I think just implementing those resets because you can always find time. You can do these resets when you're washing your hands. Cold water on your wrists, that activates our dive reflex and brings us back into the present. So, it's all these little things we can do that they really stack up and they really help. Changing your clothes before you go into your house sends a message that, "Okay, my day is over. Now I'm transitioning. I don't have to be on like that anymore." So they're really powerful. And for somebody who didn't believe in these little things,
Yeah.
I can for sure back them up that they work because I sure notice them when I don't do them.
Yeah, I was super skeptical. So I share this story with people back in 2001. I was in my 6th year of teaching and became a father for the first time and was coaching and coaching tennis, and girls and boys tennis, and announcing a lot of the home games at the high school where I was teaching. And I just got overwhelmed with all of it. And it felt like, just felt like I was on this roller coaster and I'm trapped and I can't get off. And I am not getting enough sleep. I'm not taking care of my health at all. And that led to the diagnosis of an anxiety disorder. So my therapist told me about mindfulness, and I share
Mhm.
the story the first time that I tried a breathing technique, and I was like, after a minute, I was more stressed than when I started. And I think there's this anticipation, first of all, when you're skeptical, and also when you're first trying out a practice, and you expect it to have like immediate results, and it doesn't, then you just like, and it's already sounded kind of woo woo to begin with, so you just kind of dismiss it. But then he kept sharing the research, and the
Mhm.
more I learned about neuroscience and the psychology behind, mindfulness and breathing and breath work and yoga and all these different practices that you're talking about, then that skeptical mind started to be dialed down, and I really kind of gave the practices some time, and that was, along with other supports, was what
Mhm.
saved my career. And this is the whole reason why we created this center, was to try to teach these types of practices and this type of neuroscience to
Yes.
teachers, because it can prevent them from getting burned out. It can prevent them from leaving. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and you talk about this too, is, and we talked about it a little bit before we went on,
Mm.
is when you go teach these practices, sometimes the teachers are kind of like, yeah, that sounds nice to do some breath work or to do, change my clothes or whatever. But I'm still having to work a second job, or I'm still, my principal's still breathing down my neck. These parents are sending nasty emails. Talk little bit about why there might be a need for systems change and how we can make that happen in terms of maybe some solidarity among educators to really work on the system. What types of systemic changes would be needed to address those real sort of external facing issues that teachers have?
The two that always come right to my mind, because I get this on my comments a lot. So how do we fix it? How do we change it? And I get it. Teachers, when they hear I'm like, take care of your nervous system, they're like, no, we want the system to change.
Right.
And what I found so interesting too is, and I knew this before when I was in the classroom, and I think that's why I want to use my platform to say all the things I couldn't say when I was teaching
Yeah.
because of backlash. So we talked about systemic change. However, and I do PDs at school, the regulated teacher. I have the regulated classroom. I'm working on curriculum. And I know this is going to maybe turn some districts and administrators off from me. But the system doesn't want to change because it's working by exploiting teachers.
Right.
They don't want it to change, because if they have to change, then everything changes, and that's more money. And when we can blame everything on the teacher, then when we tell the teacher, just build more relationships, what did you do to trigger this behavior? What did you do? What are you not doing? Then it keeps teachers stuck thinking I'm the problem. So then with all of this, now teachers are overwhelmed, they're burnout, they have no energy to fight back or to push back, because they're just trying to survive. They're in survival mode. They're in a fight, flight, survival mode, or they're in shutdown. And we function because of that. So also the backlash of being in trouble. I made a post the other day about when you need some time, because when a behavior situation arises and then you send the kid to the principal's office and the kid calms down, because number one, they had that space, right? They had that time to regulate. So the principal's not seeing the same kid you just saw. And they get sent back. That teacher is still that teacher can still be dysregulated. And the kids in the classroom who just witnessed this are still dysregulated. So I mentioned 3 things teachers could say to their principal, like, I need some more time to regulate my nervous system. Or if you can't give me this time, I want it documented in case something else happens. Because how many times have we had a kid send back and boom, another explosion happens? Because we're still dysregulated.
Right.
Well, the comments came in and the comments were like, oh yeah, I wish I could do this. I would get backlash. Oh, I would get labeled as difficult. Oh, I would get put, on an improvement plan. And so what happens is we want to fight the system, yet we're being penalized for speaking up. And teachers need this. I mean, there was one teacher who commented that, well, actually, not even one. I think I've had 3 comments so far that they are not allowed to talk about school. Teachers are banned at school to talk about school because it brings down the morale.
Right.
I'm like,
you talk a lot about the cognitive dissonance that educators are facing, not only from what you're describing, but also from understanding that when they go into the system and they're working with students, that they're also not necessarily doing what's in the best interest of the nervous systems of the students,
Right.
because of the demands of the accountability system. You have these standardized tests that have become the god of everything we do. Like the algorithm is all built around how do we maximize these test scores, and then we end up like a friend of mine just posted that the average elementary age child gets 18 minutes of recess a day, and we know through neuroscience that they need at least 60 minutes of outdoor unstructured play each day. And then we wonder why these kids are struggling with behavioral issues. So talk a little bit about that cognitive dissonance, and and what do we do? Like, how do we organize in a way to address the issues that you and I see clearly?
I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, when did we lose sight that teachers and staff in the district are a team. Why we should be operating as a team to help everybody. And we're all in education because we want to help kids. We want to support kids. We want to educate kids. So where did this pit become against the district versus the admin versus the teacher? So if we could all come together and collaborate and be vulnerable and be willing to look at our cognitive dissonance instead of, because what happens is, and this is a fascinating story, and this is what got me thinking about, I was listening to Brene Brown on an audiobook. I think it was Atlas of the Heart. And she shared the story about how Leon Festinger, I think that's his name, who discovered the term cognitive dissonance. There was a woman who said that she had heard from aliens, and they came, the guardians, and they came to say that there was going to be a big flood on like December 21st, 1954, I think. But they could be saved if you did these things, and if you get on the spaceship, you're saved from this flood. Well, people spent their savings, they quit their job, they did everything they could because they were going to make it onto the spaceship and be saved. So December 21st happens, they all go to the spot, and the spaceship never comes. So some of them were freaking out. And Leon, they joined this group to see what was happening and to study it.
Mhm.
Well, then some people, they could not admit that they messed up. They could not believe that they were fooled. So they started saying, oh, the spaceship didn't come because we saved them. We saved the world because of what we did. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about in ways in which schools and teachers, we live in this. And I was thinking about discipline. And I talk a lot about trauma-informed practices, because when I first learned about trauma-informed, I thought that was the solve-all. I thought relationships and the common corner were going to fix behavior. And now what I'm seeing is that's been a very good tool for administrators and districts to use, because again, it puts the blame on the teachers.
Mhm.
Oh, did you make a
Right.
relationship? Oh, you triggered
Right.
this child. What did you do? You. So I started thinking about how a lot of times when I post about behavior, I get people who want suspensions back. They want some consequences back. And so what's happening, I believe, with the cognitive dissonance in that is saying, so we have one belief that, oh, our program is working because we suspend kids, and that works. That's not what it really does. It gives the staff a breath. It gives the staff back control, and that makes our nervous system feel good. Oh, now I feel better because there was a consequence. I feel validated. I have a breath now. I can breathe. But when we start looking at the data, are those the same kids getting suspended over and over and over again? I know all the schools I was at, it was a handful. Yeah, a suspension might work for that one kid and scare them, and they could be like, I never want to go through that again. But is it really working when we're suspending the same kid 9 and 10 times? But again, the cognitive dissonance is, we're going to believe, even though we have that data that shows it's not working, we're going to believe it works because it helps somebody. It helps the adult.
Right. Right.
One example of that. But I mean, there's so much. I mean, I have friends who work in districts who have to script their lessons. They have to read their lessons. And when you know that creativity and project-based learning helps, but you have to script this lesson, again, that creates what you know to be good for kids versus what you actually have to do.
Right. Yeah, and that's the frustrating part for me. Is I think it should be clear enough to education leaders right now that what we're doing in terms of the way we've configured schools around the accountability system has done so much damage to not only teachers but to students as well, to their mental and physical well-being. Because like what you're describing earlier, we have teachers under chronic stress, teachers who are having all these autoimmune issues and other chronic illnesses, and they're burned out, and they're one of the highest rates of stress among all occupations. And then then I'm going in and like in 2016, 17 saying, hey, we could just do some breath work together and we can just breathe and just be mindful. And you're the key component to your classroom culture. And then
Yes.
after a while, they're just kind of like, that's really nice, Todd, but oh,
Right.
it's I'm not the only part of the equation here.
Yes.
But then there's this sort of milk toast. Let's try to bring mindfulness to kids and have them do it like for a minute at the beginning, a mindful minute or something like that, as though that's enough. And then they do the data on this. Says, yeah, mindfulness doesn't work at all with kids, right? So all the
And
metadata says it doesn't work.
experience trauma don't feel safe, like the meditation, the mindfulness. That calm feels very uncomfortable.
Right.
It's that kid that constantly gets in trouble and is constantly doing things. That might be their normal. That's where they feel calm in that state.
Right.
They don't feel calm not talking, closing their eyes, and being relaxed because they're always braced. They're constantly braced for something. So, yeah.
And and I think you and I probably both find it really challenging to talk with teachers because there is this truth that if you're dysregulated, the classroom environment's not going to be what it needs to be. So there
Yes.
is a responsibility on the teacher to be emotionally regulated, but we can't take that out of the context of what the system is, the kind of challenges that the system creates, whether it's parents now that are told that the teachers are indoctrinating their kids and they're Marxists and they're groomers, and teachers are having to deal with that, all those narratives, and
Yes.
then students are increasing responsibilities, and different like facets of now I've got to be the therapist for the child, and I've got to make sure that I'm differentiating for 25, 30 different students, and I've got to document everything. And so like all of this stuff has been added to the teacher's plate,
Mhm.
and yet we expect them in the midst of that to be able to regulate, and
Right.
it's but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater either, because I
Yes.
think you and I both agree that the trauma informed sort of lens, all the stuff Gabor Mate and Bessel van der Kolk, all that stuff is really important to know. But the way it's been implemented, like you said, I have like administrators who will bring me in to do mindfulness,
Mhm.
and the first thing I say is, if this is about you being more compliant with administration, that's not what my intention is here.
Yeah.
In fact, if you practice properly, you might awaken to the fact to all the ways that you are being exploited, and then you'll want to organize and push back. So,
Right.
so I'm not always going to, I think, fulfill what the administration wants out of that. And same with
Right.
the trauma informed stuff. You talk a lot about that too, and about how it, like, trauma informed practices aren't about removing consequences, and yet in many cases that's kind of how it's manifested. So I'm talk too much. Just
No,
riff
I
on
love
anything that I just brought up.
it. Well, I think too, it's hard. It's really, really hard. I'm working on a post right now that we want a map. We want a framework that will solve all behavior. And
Right.
that's not going to happen. A kid he might be disrupting because he doesn't have the skill. Another one might be disruptive because they just saw something horrific at home the night before. Another one, might be hungry. There's so many different reasons why behavior. One might need connection and attention. So we can't just look at disruption and be like, okay, here, let me go down the chart and here's what I need to do. So it makes it very difficult because they all require a different response from the teacher. And like we said, I hate, we're trying to remove things from the teacher, but yet when we talk nervous system, the teacher, when I look back on my career and I look back, my first year teaching, I taught 8th grade. I was a mess.
Hmm.
And guess what? I had a lot of behavior issues, and I was a mess, and how we handled behavior back then was just ridiculous. And so looking back, I can see when I was dysregulated, my kids were more dysregulated. They caught that energy. And I like to have adults think about it. If I called you and I was like, "Todd, I just had the worst day and I'm complaining to you," and you're like, "You know what? Yeah, me too. Forget this system." I would be like, "Yeah, right." And we're bouncing off each other. We're co-dysregulating each other. Now, if I call you and I've got you at a great time and you've just meditated and you're, in a really good calm regulated space, I'm going to borrow your calm. You're going to help me calm down just by being calm. You don't have to say anything. Your calmness is going to help me. It's like I'm working with a kid right now, an older kid, and I said, think about it. When you are on an airplane and there's a lot of turbulence, what do you do? And he said, I look around to see what everybody else is doing. And I said, exactly. And what other people are doing, does that affect you? And he said, absolutely. He said, I look, when I see the flight attendants are calm, then I can calm down. I'm like, that's co-regulation. So, there's so many instances where we're looking for that co-regulation. We're in the grocery line, we're annoyed, the line's not moving. If we catch eyes with the cashier and they give us a look like, then we're like, okay, we're seeing that we're borrowing that regulation.
Right.
So it does take the teacher to be regulated, but the school system is doing everything but regulating the teacher.
Right.
And so it's like even those times of when something big happens and you expect the teacher just to go back and teach the class, that is not fair. That is not a regulated teacher is the most powerful intervention we have. Yet we're doing everything that keeps them in that dysregulation.
Yeah. I think one of the things too that I think people discount is if you look at a generation ago, you didn't have like metal detectors and bag searches and security cameras everywhere. You didn't have the sort of the specter of is there going to be a shooting or a stabbing at the school, and that alone added to an enterprise where you've got 1,000, 2,000 human beings in a cinder block building under fluorescent lights trying to move towards a goal together that they didn't necessarily that the student didn't have necessarily have choice and that the teacher may not even have had choice in. Like you said, we're scripting the curriculum or they're not often following these sort of benchmark and certain protocols that they know aren't in line with what the students
Yeah.
that are in front of them need. And I mean, just a whole host of things. And then you add the cell phone on top of it, where everybody, when they're away from school, has unbridled access to a cell phone that they're scrolling through and messing with their attention uh,
Yes.
capabilities. And then they're coming into school and they're asked to shift attention in a different way. All of that wasn't there like a generation ago. Can you talk about like all of those things, like the technology, the security, all of that stuff, and how that's impacting the nervous systems of teachers and students?
Well, think about I don't know, and this is just me because I'm always in that activated state. Well, I'm getting better, but I've lived a lot of my life in that activated state. Think about when you leave a store and there's the detectors. I've never stolen anything in my life,
Right,
but when I walk through those detectors, my heart rate starts up, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I hope something just didn't land in my bag."
right,
That automatically makes me a little bit activated. So could you imagine walking into school? They already know about school shootings. They live in that fear. Then they're walking through these metal detectors. All that can cause an activated nervous system. And that's normal. We're human beings. Our the amygdala has one job, to scan for threat and to make sure we're safe, and we're constantly scanning. Now, maybe one kid could look at the metal detectors and say, "Oh, I feel safer. I feel better that we have these." Another kid might not interpret it that way at all. It can produce like what it produces in me. Somebody who's never stolen anything, suddenly now I walk through a metal detector and every time my heartbeat starts up.
mm,
So, and I think just living with the fact that every day their lives could be in jeopardy at school with school shootings, that already increases that activation, that baseline. So I think that's why it's important to really teach kids about their nervous system.
right.
They've got to know
Ooh,
what's happening in their nervous system.
What would you say are the top 2 or 3 things that students we can teach to students about their nervous systems? Like, what can an educator how how can we have these little sort of micro practices or just some tips, that will be really helpful for our students?
So when I started teaching kids about their amygdala and prefrontal cortex, I started off, in fact, I have them. Sorry, this looks weird. I don't know
Mm,
what's going on with my screen, but for the younger kids, I use a turtle for sage, and that's our prefrontal cortex. And then I use a crab for our amygdala, and he's snappy. And so I started using these props to teach about your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex. And it was amazing. I worked in kindergarten and first grade a lot, and they got it. They got it, and they could say, I can't tell you how many kids would come up to me later and say, "So I'm not a bad kid?"
hmm,
It was amazing. And then they can say things like, "Oh, my snappy's really firing back. My snappy's activated." They understand the language. So the things I concentrate on are teaching the kids about their thinking brain and their protective brain. The older kids, you don't have to use Snappy and Sage. Although my whole family, we use it now, Snappy and Sage. Um, but you can say my thinking brain and my protective brain. And when we explain to them that their protective brain is constantly scanning, it's called neuroception. You're constantly scanning, you don't even realize it. But think about when adults, when you walk into a room and the energy feels off, your
yeah,
body is picking up on something that your brain doesn't know yet. And so we teach them about your amygdala is only job is to keep you safe. And when your amygdala fires off, when your protective brain, your reactive brain fires off, guess what happens? Your thinking brain goes offline
right,
because that amygdala is trying to protect you. It's not worried about thinking and thinking rational thoughts. It's saying there's a danger here, we need to react. Now, what I really work on is explaining we think, a teacher calling on us and not knowing the answer is danger. It feels dangerous, but is it really danger? No. And so we work really hard at deciphering, it's goes back to the paper tiger. Is it a real tiger or a paper tiger? And so we work on that. And then also identifying the nervous system states in their body. Because for so long, we've been trying to outthink all of our problems when we really have to work with our body. And that's why I think we need to start looking at mental health through a body lens. So, what does it feel like to be calm and regulated? What does that feel like? What does that, and it's not always what that looks like because I can be in a shutdown, freeze, and look calm.
right,
So that's kind of miss. I mean, I gotta be honest with you, I loved my quiet kids. I loved my calm, quiet kids. And looking back, I'm like, how many of them were in shutdown mode? And I
right.
missed it.
Yeah, dissociating or something, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So it's the polyvagal theory, and Dr. Stephen Porges was the one who created this, and it's a ladder. And so at the top is that fight, flight, the middle is that regulated, and then down here is that shutdown and that freeze. And that's when you're like, I'm so tired of fighting. I have no control. I don't have any energy. I'm here. And that's where I think a lot of, teachers live in that fight, flight, and that shutdown. And that
mhm.
shutdown is when, we talk about changing systems. They don't have, I mean, they're barely making it through the day, let alone fighting the system. So
That's
what,
it. They're too exhausted to fight the system by the end of the day. And me
yeah,
asking them, it's like I'm asking you, regulate yourself, take care of your food, drink a lot of water, exercise, take care of your families, do the self-care things that you need to do, and also go fight the power. I don't have time for that. I don't have the energy for that.
right, right, exactly. So, and
Um,
then we teach kids like how to identify that. So, what does your fight flight mean? Does that mean your heart's beating fast? Your stomach ache feels like a tummy ache? How many kids go to the nurse for tummy aches? And maybe it's that fight flight response. Their nervous system is dysregulated because now we know the correlation between the gut and the brain. And so, teaching kids these nervous system states and how we go through all three of them every day and how they're not bad, they're this is what we do as humans, they're okay, but the goal is to get back to that regulated state quicker and then expand that window of tolerance. So teachers, I know when I was teaching, my window of tolerance was this big. By the end of the day, a kid would be tapping his pencil and I'd be like, stop tapping your pencil, because
Mhm.
my window of tolerance was this big now,
Right,
because it was just thing after thing after thing all day long.
right. And it's interesting you talked about the getting into the body, because that is something that, just relatively recently that I've been working with as well, because I tend to want to cognitively process
Yes.
any of my anxiety or any of my sort of OCD stuff that's
Yes.
going on. I've traditionally thought, okay, I'll ask ChatGPT, like, how do I do, and I'm in my head, and
Mhm.
the issue is actually it's like that it's actually bypassing where I need to go, because I think if I can just think about it, the problem enough, then I'll eventually solve it, because it works in other areas of my life.
Right.
And then but sometimes it actually requires to kind of dial down those cognitive processes and go into the body and really feel, where is it? And
Yes.
so people, like my partner will ask, say, what color is your, is it your anxiety, or what
Yeah.
shape is it, or what animal, and what,
Yeah.
and it seems so abstract to me, because I'm so cognitive. So for me to
Right.
actually to go into the body, but I have found, I've done tapping, I've done the EDMR, and and what I've found personally really helpful is yoga, which I didn't think would work on my mind,
Yeah.
but somehow doing the yoga, going back and forth and doing both sides and really moving that energy around,
Yes.
it really does help kind of release some of that stuff, and then it's not sort of on my mind as much. So let me talk a little
Exactly.
bit about that go a little bit deeper into, like, tapping, EDMR, and that kind of trauma in the body kind of stuff.
So I, like you, just, will think my thoughts and think if I can just figure this out. And also what I was realizing is my family, we are a dysfunctional family. And we try and talk through all these problems, right? We try to figure out other people in our family. God, if we could just figure them out, then everything will make sense. And we're trying to find some type of control, right, with it. And so when I started learning about the nervous system, I'm like, oh my God, we've wasted so much time talking about this, because
Yeah,
all that was doing was like reiterating and feeding and feeding. And an emotion lasts 90 seconds. But the reason why it lasts longer is because we're thinking about it. So then we're the ones prolonging this icky feeling that we have. So I first what the 2 things that I love doing, well, one of them's a bit cognitive, but before I go to sleep at night, I have a silent disco. To my Not a silent, but I put in my headphones, I go downstairs by myself and I dance. And I shake, and I mean, I move my body in ways that aren't considered dancing, but I just let
yeah,
my body flow. And I get that out because I'm completing the stress cycle of the day.
yeah,
And then before I get in bed, I say, "I deserve rest. It is time to go to sleep. I'm not gonna solve anything." And I say it out loud. When I do those 2 things alone, I sleep so much better. And again, I miss when I miss it, I can tell in my sleep. So it's that movement is what completes that stress cycle. And that's what I would do as a teacher too. If you have a kid and the behavior's very concerning, and now all the other kids have witnessed that, that's what I would do is I would make them move. I would get up, I would take them outside,
right.
if we can, or I'd move in that and I would complete that stress cycle. Animals do it. There's a
Yeah,
great video of it. Yeah.
yeah, and this is, yeah, we talk in trainings, we talk about, like, after they're chased by a lion, you
Uh-huh.
see the animal shake, right, to release,
Correct.
to go through this the stress cycle. And when I do these sessions with teachers, I'll have them get up and just shake, and then stick
Mhm.
out their tongue and just go, ah, and they look at me like, are you really doing this? But then
Yes.
if they do it for 15 to 20 seconds and really shake and really go, ah, like, and then I tell them, stop and just be still and feel it, feel the
Yes.
difference. There
Yes.
really is this release, and I think what I did early on, the mistake, I continue to repeat this mistake, is when I'm in that activated state of that I have that anxiety loop going,
Uh-huh.
I wanna shut down and I sit with it, and then it's just looping in my head, and I have to kind of force myself to be like, "No, we're gonna move. We're gonna go on a walk or a hike, or we're gonna yoga or whatever. We're gonna do something to move," because it's not the cognitive
Right.
process is not gonna get me through it. It's actually it's like a feedback, like on a guitar amp. It's like it's just gonna get louder, and it's
Yep.
that the solution isn't through thinking through it. It's really
Yeah.
about moving and releasing.
And that's
Yeah.
when you're regulated, that's when the answers come to you.
Right,
When you're in
right.
that calm space, it's like at night, there's so many times when I'm like, "Oh," the answer just will pop in. And
Yeah,
I'm like, "Oh my gosh, where did that come from?" Well, it came because now my thinking brain is back engaged because I
yeah,
live, with my amygdala running the show half the time.
right, right.
And
Yeah,
so you don't have to force the answers as much, is
yeah,
what I've learned. When I calm my body, the answers come without me having to problem solve as much.
right. One of the things I'm kind of shifting gears here, but one of the things that I did a documentary with some schools here, some small schools in rural Virginia, and one of the things that we talked, and they're very small, like the elementary age school I think has maybe 60 to 80 students, and then the high
Oh,
school maybe 20. So very small schools, like micro schools. One of the things that we talked about with the staff there is the impact that scale has on the nervous system and on the whole sort of system. And one of the things that I'm in 31st year of public education, spent half of it in schools, but I go into a building with say 1,500 or 2,000 high school students, and I remember back to when I was in high school, and all the stuff we talked about, security and all that, and social media and all that. But I'm going into this building, and you said, we are hardwired through evolution to look for threats. And
mhm.
you're in a building with 1,500 to 2,000 students, just by the nature of it,
Yes.
there's going to be more things that you become aware of that are threatening. The same with teachers. And
Yes.
so my thought is that maybe part of the systemic solution is to it's kind of cut the size of schools and
Oh,
go
yeah.
back to smaller schools, so that the teachers and students just feel safer. Just by default, they're safer
Yeah.
because they're in a smaller environment, which is more aligned with sort of our evolutionary history. Like, we didn't,
Yeah.
our ancestors weren't in groups of 2,000; they were in small
Exactly.
tribes, right?
Exactly. And that goes along with, what they say about even social media. It's like we're consuming stuff that we should not be consuming. We
Right,
know things across the world that we have no control over, and we're consuming it, and it's just regulating because we have no power over it. We can't
right.
change anything, we can't fix it, and that in itself is dysregulating. When you have no control over something, that causes dysregulation. So I was working with a kiddo who the parents decided to move to a very small school. She's thriving at this smaller school. She's doing so well at a smaller school, and so that's what too, if we talk about systemic changes, is those smaller classrooms. I mean, all of us have been in classrooms where you can't even walk because you have so many desks. That's crowd
Mhm.
control.
Right, right.
That's
That's
not teaching. That's
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why the system is the way it is when you have a system, a scale, then your
Mhm.
cafeterias and the food in the cafeteria has to look a certain way. Then, recess becomes much more difficult to manage when if you have to give every kid 60 minutes on a
Right,
playground. Like, it's
right.
you have one playground and you've got 1,000 kids.
Mhm.
How do you give them 60 minutes, first of all?
Right.
And then, like you said, more children per teacher, and then the administration has way more headaches that they have to deal with. So the whole
Well,
system
yeah.
is set up in a way that it's going to so then you have to create all these command and control structures to
Mhm.
to keep people in line, and to, like you said, the scripted curriculum then comes becomes a thing, the benchmarks, the all of the sort of paint by colors teaching
Yeah,
that we're forced to do, because it's all about control.
absolutely. And You just made me think of something that I haven't thought in a long time. There was a year where I would say probably 80% of our behavior problems when I was a behavior specialist came from recess.
Right, right,
So that year, the teachers were like, I hate recess because
right,
after recess, these it was a lot of the boys and they were getting in fights playing sports, and then it carried into the classroom. And so that's a hard thing too, because then who do you get to supervise the recesses? If
right,
you're taking more, and then
right.
it's a whole thing.
Absolutely. It and what ends up happening is you just try to make it as easy as you can, right?
Mhm.
But then there's all these things that you have to sacrifice because of the scale of the
Right,
system. And that
right,
happens from the district office has this whole command and control structure to its administrators in the schools, and the schools have to have this command and control structure. It's all top down,
right.
and then we're missing what's happening on the ground to the nervous systems of the teachers and the students, and what's happening to their physical and mental well-being. Um, but we're kind of coming close to the end of time. One of the books that I thought of when you were talking about the crabby and
Uh-huh,
sage, the amygdala, and all that was The Whole Brain Child by Dr.
oh,
Dan
yeah,
Siegel.
uh-huh,
And so I just wanted to anybody who's watching who wants to learn more about the neuroscience from an especially for educators. The
yes.
Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel is a good one. Are there other books that you would recommend for people who want to learn more about the neuroscience? Because I feel like in our teacher ed programs, we
Mhm.
don't do enough neuroscience, and I always say it's kind of like becoming a mechanic and you've never opened the hood of the car to learn about what the engine's all about. Like it doesn't make sense. So
I think I have mine right here. If I could do a shameless plug, I wrote a book. It's not you, it's your nervous system. And this isn't it's not based on teachers, it's based on personal. But once you understand the neurosystem, everything will make sense and your students will make sense too.
right, right,
I and I reference students and my own experience in teaching in this book. But the other book that I just had a huge impact on me is Dr. Bruce Perry's The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog.
okay,
That changed my life. Like that
okay,
was I mean, it was hard. It was difficult, his stories he shared, but I love Dr. Bruce Perry. I think he's right
yeah,
on with you've got to regulate before you reason. You cannot reason, you cannot put in enforce consequences until the child is regulated because their thinking brain is offline. So when you're just consequencing them, they're not grasping that. They're not hearing it. A
right.
consequence is more of a threat. You have got to regulate before you hand down that consequence.
And that gets to sort of a philosophy around discipline, which is, I think that people have a very uh, what do we call it, retributive, or there's a name for it, and it's instead of it's like assuming that there's some type of evil seed in the
Uh-huh,
child, that
uh-huh.
they just need more discipline,
Yeah,
and that it's not approaching it with like a curiosity. And Bruce Perry, his book "What Happened to You" is like that's like the question. It's
uh-huh,
and I think we don't want. It's almost like teachers and school leaders sometimes don't want to look at cause and effect.
uh-huh.
They don't really want to explore like what exactly is happening. Like why is this misbehavior? They're just rather
Yeah.
say there's this misbehavior and the punishment for that is this, and we're going to apply that.
And that
Um,
goes back to
yeah,
that control. We want to understand it, to control it, to make our nervous system feel better. Because if it's that simple formula, you misbehave, consequence,
right.
that helps us feel like we have some control and calm. When you think and this is what I would recommend when you're looking at behavior is asking, what is this nervous state telling me?
Yeah.
What threat did this child perceive, real or not? And that's hard. I mean, and this is why it's so hard, because again, the teachers, who has time? You have to teach. You're going to be, all your standardized test scores are going to be up on the screen for everybody to see how well
Right.
you did or how well you didn't do. So you don't want to take time out to spend the time with these behaviors. But I really do believe, and I always say, if I had my own school, half of the day would be spent on nervous system and regulation and all this stuff, because I guarantee you the last half, or vice versa, whatever, would be, we would have a lot more learning done.
Yeah. I always ask teachers when we talk about this, it's like, I have 3 kids and, 2 are already through school. Well, one's in graduate school and the other, and I have a 3rd child who's, entering her junior year. And they've all done well academically and they're all, reasonably fine.
Uh-huh.
But I've always said I would rather that they be, uh, emotionally, mentally, physically well and
Yes.
have the tools that they need to be
Yes.
happy and to fulfilled and resilient than
Same.
to have straight A's. And so
Same.
it's like, but when we get into school, it's like we think the only purpose of school is
Mhm.
academics, and it's like if we're actually in the business of preparing students for their adult life and trying to help them have an adult life that's going to be healthy and successful, we can't bypass what you're talking about. You can't
Right.
bypass how do you work with the nervous system, because this is our society. The way it is now is proof positive of what happens when you don't. You end
Yes.
up with metal detectors and security cameras and security guards, and you
Yes.
end up with a massive prison population. You end up with an epidemic of health and mental health issues and suicide, and
Yes.
you end up with all of that dysfunction. And then it's like, okay, yeah, but we improved test scores by 3% last year. And but it's like,
Right.
why I don't understand why people don't see that as a priority, because no matter what the future holds with AI and careers, if you don't have that ground
Exactly.
work in being no, how do I find joy in this life and peace when I need to? How do I regulate this nervous system that I
Yes.
have that's primed to start to
Yes.
panic or freak out? Like, it doesn't matter how much money you've made, or what you've done in college or what your career is, because you're living a life of, Thoreau says, of quiet desperation all the time.
Yes. And I think that's what employers are complaining about. They people, they don't have people that can be a team player.
Right.
They don't have people, they're complaining about these soft skills.
Yeah.
And I'm like you. I would much rather a kid, and what I would wish for my daughter and grandkids and all of that is to understand the nervous system and be regulated, and like you said, find that joy, find that happiness,
Yeah.
way more than a test score. It's
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying we've gotta change this.
Yeah, because from that healthy state, you'll make the decisions. This is the thing. If you have to put the cart before the horse. If you have a healthy nervous system, if you are, really intentional about the choices that you're making with your own health and with your own nervous system, then it's just the byproduct of it, that is you're going to find your way in life.
Yes.
Maybe you're not an AP student, but you're going to find a pathway forward that works for you, and we don't have to worry about it. But with this whole obsession with getting kids college and career ready without the nervous system stuff,
Yes.
you're creating a generation of dysfunction. And it's this is why so many kids need to be medicated. I mean, this just the idea that we kids have to go to a school where there could be a school shooting, and where we have to medicate a huge percentage of them just so they'll comply with the dehumanized system that they enter.
Yes.
And then we have teachers who are doing the same thing, who are
Yeah.
self-medicating.
I had a teacher say that they were sharing Xanax.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's true. Really quick, you brought up, cell phones before, and I wanna mention I had made a post on how we can't compete with cell phones. I mean, these are neuroscientists who created these screens to keep people on, to keep people addicted, and, so I talked about this in one of my posts, and a teacher wrote that she was evaluated and she got told that her lessons need to be more engaging so that the kids won't want to be on their phone. I'm just like, what? So what do you
Right,
want her to do? Like, how much more
right,
engaging? You know what?
right.
And again, it's back on the teacher rather than saying these cell phones are
That's right. That's right.
addicting.
Because
And
each one that's the crazy thing because the cell phone, the algorithm learns each individual student. How's a teacher supposed to, do
give them
that?
that
I mean,
dopamine
yeah,
hit.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
impossible.
right.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. I wanna honor the time that I said, and we're running up at 8 o'clock. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I appreciate your time and expertise. And I just want folks who are watching who want to learn more and follow Carolyn's work. She's got amazing posts on TikTok. It's just look up the nervous system teacher. Are there any other socials you'd like to share, or any websites or anything?
I'm on Instagram as the nervous system teacher, Facebook as Carolyn Contreras. So I
Okay,
think I'm pretty
great.
easy to find. Thank you. Thank
All
you
right.
so much, Todd.
Yeah,
This has been such a pleasure. Thank you.
yeah. Great conversation. Thank you. I knew it would be. Thank you so much, Carolyn. I appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
You have a
Bye
great
bye.
day. All right, bye-bye. All right, everybody. That was Carolyn Contreras. Again, you can find her, Carolyn Contreras, on Facebook, the nervous system teacher on Instagram and TikTok. So please make sure you do that. We are going to actually, we don't normally do this, but we're going to have another live stream tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about the SCEA's legislative agenda. And I just realized there was a spelling error there. That's going to be tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. I need to fix that. Dina Cruz, Annie Wilson, Katie Lechner, Kat Lowe, and Caleb Mickler will join me for a conversation about the SCEA's legislative agenda, including several bills that are being discussed in the State House. So we hope you'll join us then. And next week on the 17th, so a week from tomorrow, we're going to be meeting with or talking with James Baraz, who is an amazing human being and wrote a book called Awakening Joy. And we're going to be talking about joy in education. He's a former educator who now leads retreats and just is doing some incredible work. So hopefully you can join us on June 17th at 6 o'clock for that conversation with James. The primaries are happening today, and the results are coming in now. I don't have those results to share with you, but we probably will tomorrow. And I just want to wish all the candidates well. Thanks so much to Lisa Ellis and Sylvia Wright for joining us on past live streams. And no matter what your political inclinations are, we want to encourage all educators to be registered to vote and to go out and make your voices heard, and to use that privilege that you have to go out and be a part of our democracy and elect the kind of leaders that you think will lead us forward in a wise and responsible way. So, good luck to all the candidates, and I we'll see who wins, and then we need to be ready to vote in November. So, hopefully, if you're not registered, you'll get registered soon. Once again, I want to remind everybody that the SCEA is currently in their early enrollment period. That means that if you join today, you wouldn't pay any dues for June, July, or August. Your first dues would start coming out in September. So it's a great way, if you have not joined our movement, it's a great way for you to start right now, to be part of that movement. And as Carolyn and I talked about, if we want to have systems change, I know there's so much already on your plate, but whether you're a education support professional, bus driver, or cafeteria worker, or if you're a classroom teacher or you're an administrator, we've got to come together to organize and work for the kind of systems that all educators and their students deserve. And the best way you can do that is by joining the SCEA at jointhescea.org. And once again, you can find out all you want to know about our Center for Educator Wellness and Learning at cool.us at CEWL.us. So check that out. And last but not least, I want to remind you that the SCEA also has an Instagram page. So go over to the Instagram.com. You can look for the SCEA, and same on TikTok. It's TikTok.com / at the SCEA. Lots of great content over there that you might be missing. So please join us over there. Thanks again, Carolyn Contreras, and thank you for tuning in. And we will see you tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock for our legislative agenda live stream. Until then, have a great night. Bye, everybody.